Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. David here, reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Take the time to put in a review with the service where you found our podcast, like iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Get involved. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/practicalguitarist. You can also find us on Twitter as @PractGuitarist. If you're interested in supporting the show, we have launched a Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. If you'd like to donate money to the show, there's always Patreon. Our Patreon is available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can do so at questions@practicalguitarist.com. On with the show. Hi, Jim.
Hi, David.
38 weeks to Gearfest.
I don't hear somebody counting down to the next time you can have beer.
Gearfest. Hey, I'm 3 months into year no gear. I can do this all year long.
Yeah.
38 weeks, man. 38 weeks. I will probably be getting a wireless system of some sort. I have a cat, Merle, not Michonne, and yes, they're Walking Dead named. Merle likes to chew on my cables. So rather than try to tidy up every 5 minutes, I think it might be more prudent for me to get some sort of a wireless cable situation going.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try to look for like the cheapy system, either the X5 or the Boss, I think, at this point. Because I don't really plan on gigging with it.
Yep.
So you guys can crucify me if you want, but it's kind of a necessity because I don't want my cat destroying my fucking $40 cables for the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't care.
I got my big planned purchases coming in this year, which soon I will be getting the call for the King of Tone and the big. Then remember that was purchased not purchased, but I got on the list for that thing 2 years ago.
Ordered it 2 years ago. Yeah,
2 years ago, and then what else? Oh,
but you keep saying it's coming. It's coming.
The 50/50 is imminent, and when that shows up, I will be ordering one and putting it up. It'll stay in the box and go into a bin because you knew I was going to get that anyway, and that's something I'm not going to play until basically year no gear's over. So
yeah,
and I want it. I do like the DoD 250, and because of my affinity for the Yngwie Malmsteen stuff and what I'm learning right now, it would be nice to have, but it's going to go in a bin.
Yeah.
I passed on that thing 3 times already. So anyway.
Well. Yeah, and as you know, I was looking at a cabinet for practice.
Well, it doesn't matter because
hopefully things work out.
You done broke Gear No Gear a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I still think that buying a cabinet to put in a rehearsal room is not a year of anything. I don't care what anybody says.
I wish you guys could see Jim rolling his eyes right now. His eyes are rolling so hard.
That's the most ridiculous thing.
His eyes are rolling so hard, I swear he's going downhill.
See, okay, so the place I rehearse, he's got like 50 guitars, and he doesn't play guitar.
He's just a collector.
The husband who passed away of his girlfriend that he's, engaged to, was a collector. So they were there, and so he's like, Jim, take your pick, whatever you want to play, just grab it.
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
We're talking Les Pauls, we're talking
play the Widow's guitars. It's fine.
Well, yeah.
I would be like, no, I'll play mine.
Well,
Thank
he never
you.
played them. He never played them, so I don't care. He didn't play. The guy that died didn't play either.
Is there
he was
anything
just a collector.
like really crazy there that you'd like to get your hands on?
Oh yeah, there's a couple of old Strats. I'm going to take a look and I'm going to get some pictures. But my thing is, he said, yeah, just go grab one. There's a few basses there, Fender and so on and so forth. But the guy doesn't play.
Take some pictures next time if they ever want to dump one of those old Strats. Maybe I'll have to cast my lot. But
she's a local circuit judge, so they do pretty well. They've got an old home that they own, and
that's cool.
Downtown Norfolk.
Did I ever tell you when I bought my Princeton?
Yeah.
Did I ever told you that story? So, a Well, with Cole Duke actually, who sent me a message via Facebook. He knew I was looking for an old not an old blackface, but a blackface style amp, and he caught a Princeton in my area on Reverb for like $500.
Wow.
And I bought it like immediately. I didn't even think about it.
Oh yeah.
And it was for local pickup only, which is why it was sitting there. And it only been on Reverb for like 2 hours or something. It was ridiculous. And I went to go pick it up from the guy's house, and I knew it was in the city, and I was like, oh my god, where am I going? Like this thing's totally stolen, right? And I get there, and I go in the house. I actually get to the neighborhood, and then I start seeing these $1 million homes everywhere. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then I drive up the street, and I'm in the $3 million home district. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm becoming less and less afraid of like being mugged, and more afraid
of
a serial killer
pulling you over.
No, of a serial killer.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I pull over and I go in the driveway, whatever, and I send a message to the guy, and like I'm out front and whatever, and he says, "Come on in." So I come in. He's got huge Dobermans. Probably, I think it was 2 or 3. And I walk into his kitchen, and there's the Princeton sitting on the counter. And he says, can I interest you in a Mesa Boogie and a bunch of other stuff? And I got Paul Reed Smith I'm selling. And I'm like, honestly, I right now I'm financially strapped, but I said I'm here for Princeton. Like I really want, I wanted a blackface Fender for a while, and they said this is a great way for me to get into one. And he said, I should let you know. He's like, I retubed it, changed the speaker. He did all the upgrades, right? It's got the Weber, like the really nice fancy Weber speaker in it and everything. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. I have no problem with that. He's like, you want to hear it? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. So he plugs it in, and he opens his case, and he's got a 1960-something 335, right? Cherry, like that beautiful, like bright red color.
Red.
And his strap looks like something from the 60s. And I'm like, who do you play with? Because at this point, I know this guy's like a professional musician. Because he's got, I got Paul Reed Smith and everything else I'm trying to sell too, if you're interested. And it's obviously I'm not buying a ripped off amp at this point. He's not a serial killer because he hasn't stabbed me yet.
Right.
He shoved me down the stairs. He didn't invite me into his
that
basement.
Would have already happened.
He motioned to the basement when he said, "Can I interest you in Mesa Boogie?" So I know all the stuff was downstairs, but I'm like, is he going to push me down the stairs? Kind of deal. And no, none of that happened. So he plugs into the Princeton and he hits a couple chords. I'm like, wow, it sounds really good. And then he's like, would you, you want to try it? And I was like, I looked in for a minute. And I'm like, yes, I do, with a big, big smile on my face. And he hands me his gravity pick, right? And he's like, here, take it for a spin. So he's like, oh yeah, and don't drop the guitar. It's worth about $30,000. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, right? So
out of a box, a 335 is
already like a
$6,000.
Yeah, it's like between $4,000 and $6,000 depending whether it's custom shop or not. And this guy's handing me an original.
$4,000 is a cheap one.
Yeah, he's handing me an original, right? He's like, yeah, go down on it. So I asked him, I was like, what band are you with? And he says, I actually used to play for New Colony 6. And he's like, I've done a lot of studio and session work since then. So I don't know if anybody knows New Colony 6. They were kind of a local Chicago outfit, in the 60s. Probably, yeah, right. I think they ended before 1970. And they did, he had a bunch of like local hits and stuff. And he was probably making a pretty lucrative living as a musician. So kind of cool. And I walked out with a Princeton for $500. And the Princeton's actually in the possession of one of my friends now. I ended up not jiving well with the Princeton, and it moved on.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, sometimes it's the way it goes.
And yes, I passed the deal on.
Speaking of hardware, we've got a thread in the group, and it's got quite a bit of things to talk about today. So
there's so much fucking hardware.
Tonight's topic is guitar hardware. First of all, let's talk in general about hardware.
We're talking about hardware, but I think we should. Right. I think we should be very clear about this. There are so many gadgets that have been developed for guitar. Like standard equipment for a guitar is either like a vibrato style Fender bridge, jazz, and then there are of course the offset bridges too, and then there's like the Tune-o-matic styles, and Bigsby's and all that stuff fit in there, but those are pretty standard options, right? And they're rooted in history. But lately things have been getting pretty crazy, and there's all kinds of alternatives, which is why we're
exactly.
talking
And
about
one of the
this
first
thread.
ones that we're talking about is Irvana Nut. So Nick Bunger's posted about the Irvana Nut. Have you ever used one of those? Because I have.
Yes, I have. I played somebody else's, not my own.
Yeah, me too.
So I have a really, I would say, traditionalist opinion of the Irvana Nut, which is, I get what it does. It works at what it does. It makes the guitar play more in tune with itself. I think in certain situations that might be really useful, but for me, when I play it, it sounds wrong. For whatever reason, my ears are like, that's not the way your guitar is supposed to sound, and I freak out, and it feels weird, and then I start overcompensating, undercompensating. I think if I owned a guitar with an Irvana Nut, I'd be fine. Like, I would get used to it, but then I would be the guy that has to replace all the nuts on my guitars to the Irvana Nut. Like, that's the same reason I don't have a scallop guitar right now, is because I know that once I do
why would you? Right, because once you do it, you're not going to be able to go back. So I play the Irvana Nut as well, and I jived with it. I thought it was nice. It reminded me, as far as the feel and the sound went, of like a compensated bridge. So
a little bit.
Yeah. So it was in a similar thing to me. I think the Irvana Nuts are good. Now, speaking of nuts and Irvana and all that stuff, when you do a string change, do you put nut sauce on your strings at the nut?
No. And so that I'm using the Graphtec nuts on all my Strats, and I am starting to use the I guess it's Dunlop equivalent of nut sauce that I use on my my Gibson style guitars. My SG has never actually needed it, believe it or not. But I just found out the other day. I was at my local guitar shop, and we were looking at my SG because I had it set up, and he took a look at it. And he goes, "That's not the original nut." I said, "Really?" I said, "Because this guitar was bought new." He looked at it. He goes, "No." He's like, "They replaced it at the store then," because he's like, "That's not the style nut that comes on a 2016."
That's not the Tectoid.
Yeah, and I asked him. He's like, "No, I'm pretty sure this is Tusk." He's like, "This is the Graphtec." So, kind of cool. That would explain why I haven't had to use Big Bends on it. Although I did have him throw some sauce in it when I was at the shop, because I immediately noticed it was going out of tune when I was doing certain bends and stuff. So I was like, all right, there's something going on here. And I didn't know the Gibsons had the kind of tuning issues that I've been experiencing, and apparently it's really, really common. So I'm completely okay with it now, and we just put it up and go.
I use a little bit of nut sauce, and honestly, I haven't had the tuning problems on my Gibsons that other folks have mentioned. But then again, I use nut sauce.
So can I say something real quick, just with regards to nut sauce? I don't know how we've gotten through the last 4 or 5 minutes without me making some sort of a dick joke.
Well, when your nuts are that saucy, you just keep a little extra for later.
Yeah, it's been really hot here today, so my nuts are probably pretty saucy.
Yeah, it's pretty muggy outside. Luckily I work in an air-conditioned area. So Jason Fuzzmonger, speaking of folks who work, he's probably working right now.
Yeah.
So he asked about I couldn't find anything about a Ducey Les Trem, but the Zero Glide nut, again, we're kind of in that nut thing. I think everybody wants a nut that allows you to have, you've seen the zero nuts, zero frets that kind of help the nut out.
So the Deuce Les Trem, I believe that's the device you actually sent me.
No, that was a different one.
Oh, I thought it was the Les Trem.
No, the one I sent you that's coming up later. That was the Tremologic.
I am going to have that installed on my... No, I think it's a Les Trem, man.
No, it was the Floyd Rose rail tail that I sent.
Oh, no. I'm talking about the actual physical tremolo you sent me for my SG.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, it's a Les Trem.
Oh, what do you think of it?
I haven't installed it yet. I looked at the hardware. The hardware's really beefy. I think it's going to be cool. I'm nervous about any sort of vibrato that is not of the conventional variety. I was looking at the FRX to put on my SG for a while.
I mean, in all reality, all you're doing is you're going to put it on and you're out maybe a set of strings if they don't.
Yeah,
You know.
and I'm not concerned about that. I just want to make sure it holds tune. Like if it actually works, Jim, I'll probably use it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I will comment on it on the show when I do install it, and we will talk.
Yep.
We will have a little bit of an in-depth discussion as to how well it works.
Yeah. So those who aren't aware, when I fell off the wagon of the year of no gear, 20 days into it or so, and I got my SG, which
24 days into it, I believe. 22
in
or
its
24.
case, and yeah, I'll give myself 20 days credit because at that point I was already ready to jump. When I got the SG, it had in a bag. It wasn't installed, but in a bag it had the Ducey. I thought it was. I don't know if it's short for like Duesenberg type.
Yes, that's exactly what it
It's
is.
got to give it.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly what it is. Ducey is Deuce and Berg.
Yeah, Duesenberg Les Paul trem, and what it is, it's an aftermarket tremolo. You could stick right on. All you do is take your current bridge off. Well, actually, your current.
It's just the tailpiece.
The tailpiece, yeah. You take your current stop bar tailpiece off. You put this tailpiece on. It doesn't require any changes to your guitar whatsoever, except possibly the height of the.
Yeah, that's why I balked on the FRX, because you do have to install a locking nut for that thing.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to install a locking nut on something I don't unless I'm there are guitars that I would probably do that too.
I'm probably gonna
PRS, I would do that too.
I'm probably gonna keep my SG forever, to be honest with you, but I'm just I'm still not to the stage yet where I'm like, I will absolutely keep this guitar forever. There have been a couple times where I've been like, so that's why I haven't gone FRX. If I really want to put a trem on it, I'll go to FRX. But actually, I kind of like the fact that it's stop tail right now. It's one of the few guitars where I can bend and it doesn't go all crazy on me.
Yeah,
we'll talk more about that later, because there's another piece of gear that I'm looking at. May actually fix that problem. So he said Tone Pros. I think as far as Gibson goes, Tone Pros is pretty much that's your standard. That's ubiquitous when it comes to. Well, no,
Gibson.
Tone Pros are not used on Gibsons
really?
From the factory. No, Tone Pros is like an aftermarket brand, and it has I've always bought Tone Pros aftermarket, so yeah. I always assumed that it was Tone Pros that they were putting on. No, they use their own proprietary ABR bridge right now. On most of their guitars, I'm sure some of their reissue stuff they're using other things, but the Tone Pros, the whole idea is that it locks together. And so the system doesn't have any play in it, which is supposed to provide better sustaining contact with the body. I don't know that that's as important as a thing that I like to call bridge creep on older Les Paul style bridges, especially ones from the 90s and the 80s. Like, I've noticed that just playing them in the store and stuff, if you bang those hard enough, you can actually turn the thumb screws in some cases, and it'll actually mess with the action or the intonation. And it doesn't take a lot to mess with the intonation of a guitar. I mean, literally, you can rest your hand behind the bridge on one of those guitars, and it'll mess up the intonation because you're changing the stress that's on the string, and so therefore the tension.
Huh. Why did I think the Tone Pros came with your
those are
Epiphone?
Tunomatics, I think.
The Tunomatic.
They call their bridge a Tunomatic, but
Tunomatic.
They have different systems. Like, I know they're on I think it's the ABR system. I want to say now, but it's a whole thing. And you know what? Honestly, I think stop tail bridges are basically just stop tail bridges, in my estimation.
Yeah.
Brass saddles may make a difference depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But really, you're paying for a solid bridge. I do not like the ones that have that vintage, like the retainer spring thing, which is really just a long piece of wire that runs across. I hate that fucking thing. And I have one on my Shingze, and that bridge is getting replaced. I'm putting the Tone Pros in it. Like, I've already decided. I just haven't got around to doing it yet. But go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing that Jason mentioned was a thing called Tremologic. Now, I'd never heard of it, but I had seen it, which after I watched a video about it, I was like, oh, I remember those things. I still think it's a one-trick pony. It's a good-looking idea for the guitar, but it's the one where you have it's kind of like, imagine a Floyd Rose, but for every single string. So each string, I akin it to the, I relate it to the, what is it, the Evertune?
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly looks a little bit like the Evertune bridge.
Yeah, in that each string has to have its own tension.
Yeah, but
what's just like
what's fucking weird about this thing is that I'm looking at a picture of it, and it's got those big tail pieces, which I'm assuming allow you to do vibrato effects per string.
Yeah, so you can do one string vibrato.
But you're gonna have to move your hand position to a place where you're not picking in order to use it, which makes it
absolutely.
I mean, I guess if your style is built around it, that's fine. But for me, this would be fucking useless.
In the thread, I put a link to a video if anybody's interested, where a guy does a whole song where he's using it. And honestly, here's what I said, and I stand by this. Here's some relatively boring shred to show off one of those aforementioned products. It's a 3D movie.
I saw that.
It's cool
today.
now and again, but overdone. When overdone, it comes out like Jaws 3D. It just got where this is silly. I mean, it just, I could see it. Like I said, it seems like a one-trick pony. One song, one cool thing, but I couldn't see.
I don't think you could base an entire repertoire on that piece of equipment. I don't mind. So I'm also a guy that's like, I remember when Korn came out with their signature guitar and they had that weird whammy system with the rail set across the top of the bridge. Like, I get that kind of playing because a lot of people do that where they rest their hand on the bridge and use that for their tremolo effects. Yep. And in fact, I've seen players who don't even use the bar. They never even install a bar on the guitar. And that's fine. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily the same thing. It actually looks kind of painful to use. If you see the one with the curved piece instead of the actual levers with a flat thing on it.
Yeah, this one, the one that I put the video up in, has the flat.
This belongs in some BDSM porn. That's what this is.
Yeah, this is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So then we've got the FU Tone anything.
Okay,
the company is FU Tone.
I can comment on FU Tone. I've seen some of their products, and I've used people I know who've had their products installed on their guitars. The titanium bridge block is one that I've heard of before. I've seen their titanium bridges, like their saddles and stuff. Those are extremely expensive. You want to spend a lot of money on your Floyd Rose system? Go to FU Tone because they got upgrades that you probably didn't know existed. They do offer some really cool products. They got the springs that are they're tension rated springs. So that if you're going to install them in your tremolo block, you can choose to use three springs, right, of the right weight, and they're coated so they don't make all that rattling noise that a lot of Stratocaster players have to deal with. So I'd love to get some of their tension springs. I think they're a little pricey. I figure I could probably get the same stuff from McMaster Carr if I'm wise enough and look hard enough. But that being said, like, at least with FU Tone, you know that they've tested what they're giving you and all that. They have a lot of endorsers over there. A lot of people use like one small product from them. Like one thing, like the titanium bridge blocks or something like that. So which leads us into what's the next item on the list here? Because I know
the next item,
talk about bridge blocks later too.
Yeah, so I mentioned Evertune. A couple other people mentioned Evertune. So, what is your feel of Evertune? I've only tried an Evertune guitar, so I'm going to come from a very small.
Yeah, I have a very limited experience with them too. I tried one at a store, probably a year, I want to say. And actually, I thought it was a Kahler when I picked it up, which was really kind of funny. Mm-hmm. And then I looked and I was like, "This is not a Kahler." And I was like, "This has got to be one of those Evertune jobs." And somebody had set it up, so this is why I know you can bend on them, because they had set it up so that you could bend on this. Yes, you can if you tune the string to pitch and leave it alone, you can set the bridge so that you cannot bend. And it is the weirdest fucking thing on earth when you bend and the string stays the same tension and tuning.
Yep. Yep.
My
understanding is whoever invented this thing was like this nut, as far as like he was.
It's an engineering
he couldn't
masterpiece.
stand a string being out of tune, so he did all this work to create this system.
It was an engineer, right? And he decided, because I was reading about it today. He figured that he looked at the other existing systems and he said, "How come nobody's done this already?" Because he'd already figured it out in his head how he's going to do it. So then they took it to prototype and they basically built this thing. And it's it's actually a pretty clever system. They're using balanced tension springs on both sides to make sure that the string comes naturally back to pitch. And it's really damn creative, actually. I wish that it had some way for you to switch on the fly between bend and non-bend mode, because I could definitely see this being a tool that a lot of people would want to have in their arsenal. Those guys that are buying like the Nirvana thing, or the there's a Buzz Fightin tuning system where they actually modify the scale
Buzz
length of the
Fightin,
guitar.
that's the one that's the one where the guy was a little bit.
Yeah, now if you want to go to like Buzz Fightin or something like that, like I could definitely see an Evertune bridge being right up your alley, because it's very similar concept. I would think that probably even the intonation is better on the Evertune bridge than any other bridge on earth, because it actually,
I would think,
it's tension based. Okay.
Yep.
That being said, I would not use an Evertune bridge. Again, I have intense problems with even the Nirvana nut, because I'm like, it sounds too in tune to me. Like, this doesn't sound right.
So not being a shredder, at all. My playing style is I hit a note, and if it doesn't quite sound right, I bend it.
Right. I think we all do that instinctively.
Yeah,
and
we
don't even realize we're doing it.
Yeah, I was playing a song today by Level 42. There's a band that plays some easy music.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah. And I was doing a solo in one of their big hits.
If that's
from the
Level
80s,
42, I don't want to fucking see Level 43.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, oh, now I know why they called him Level 42. And so anyway, the in the solo, there's a lot of bend. I mean, that guy's bending the crap out of the string, and he's glissanding up and down the neck. And I just went, oh yeah, there goes my fingers. The tips of my fingers, you can't see them in this, but they are totally ripped pieces just from playing that one song.
I just thought the structure of it was hard to follow. Like, that was my whole thing.
Their chord structure is, well, have you ever seen the bass player play? I mean, oh geez, that guy Mark something or other. It starts with an M, but he's an incredible bass player. Just his pop and slap. He's the kind of guy, he plays chords and pop and slap all the time. Yeah. I don't know if he knows how to.
You can't get him to, like, if you had to slow him down, you'd have to cut off 3 of his fingers. You know, like that's.
Yeah. He's
and his thumb.
Incredible player. Well, all that said, I just think that for me, the Evertune just didn't work. Even though somebody had set it up for bending, and I know it can be set up for bending, I didn't feel like you remember that when you're playing and you go to bend, part of it is your ear, part of it is muscle memory.
Yeah, and the thing about the Evertune is, depending on how the bridge is set up to bend, you can actually adjust how much is a half step in your bending tension. It's insane. And that was my reaction too when I played. It was like, wait a minute, that's a half step,
right? Yeah,
it's
and
weird.
I think that there's a certain something to be said about we wouldn't have quarter note bends if quarter note bends weren't useful, and they're used all the time in all kinds of music. And so, being a little bit out of tune and coming back there's a certain amount of tension release.
Tension release, right?
That comes with a song that needs that. And for me, the Evertune is not something I would. Now, if I think somebody said, was it Nick or somebody who mentioned it would be good if they made an Evertune for an acoustic, because for an acoustic, if you're straight up cowboy chords, and your
Is it-
standard bar chord player. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was thinking, so, yeah, I mean, it works great. It would work great on an acoustic guitar. But then I think about Babicks. Are you familiar with Babicks?
Yeah.
And they make those guitars with the strings that actually go through like a loop or something around the top of the edge of the guitar to like make sure that the top is very lively. That's really, really cool. And that's a great application of science. However, they look ugly as sin.
Oh my God, yes, they look horrendous. Ugh.
But you know what they should do? And I should probably write Babicks and be like, if you could figure this out, this would be even better. What if you put the posts inside the guitar so that somehow the strings ran from the inside of the guitar up through the bridge across the top?
Instead of across the top like they do, because
you'd have to come up with some way. Well, I mean, around the edge of the guitar, even you could put little holes for the strings to go in, and it would be the same concept. I mean, the holes would, of course, be a part of the bracing, so maybe that might even be better if you think about it. Although it does put more tension on the bracing, so the bracing's got to be really damn good.
I'll put a link for the Babicks in the group.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes.
Babicks. ICZ, right?
Babicks. Yeah. And they make a bunch of bridges and stuff for like Stratocasters.
They make a.
I'm looking at their Strat bridge. So I am going to fix up the white Fender Strat I have. I don't know when I'm going to do it. I don't know what I'm going to do to it. So I've been investigating bridges because I'm not a big fan of the vintage 6 screw bridge. I'm looking at the Super V, the Blade Runner, which is also in this list. We'll get to that in a minute. The Babicks equivalent, and then the Floyd Rose Railtail, which I actually like the Floyd Rose Railtail quite a bit. So,
yeah.
The only thing is it's decked. It's decked, so you can't bend up on it.
Yeah. So I did look. I was right. The Tone Pros have been used on Les Paul. As a matter of fact,
oh really?
According to Tone Pro's site, they started. They recognized that they were using the Gibson. Gibson USA is now equipping Les Paul and SG models with Tone Pro's patented System 2 locking bridge systems as standard equipment.
When did that happen?
It's
fairly recent.
Well, this says NAMM 2018.
Yeah, fairly recent.
Yeah.
I don't. Well,
but I know
it wasn't more than 5 years ago because when I was looking at Gibsons 5 or 6 years ago, they were not doing that, or at least not the ones I was looking at.
Yeah, and a big that was a big upgrade to like if you got an Epiphone.
Well, it's because Epiphone comes with the shittiest, cheapest hardware you can get your hands on. Basically, it's like one step above pot metal.
Yep, that's pretty much it. I mean,
you can melt it with a lighter.
If you wonder where your cans, your aluminum cans and stuff go when you're done with it, where do you think all that metal goes? Goes back into the system.
Yeah,
it becomes weaker aluminum. So Jay Wells asked about the brass tone block. Now you had some interesting insight into the brass tone block. I have some insight, but only as a bass player. So I'll come in as a bass player.
Does it matter? First question. Yes, it does.
Yes.
But I think the amount that it matters based on what the literature says versus my real world experience is a whole nother animal, right? So I had an SRV Strat at the time, and it had the big shitty zinc block that they put in all the fenders. And I threw the zinc block in the trash, and I bought myself the Callahan. I believe Callahan. Let me look. I believe it's brass, but it's the old style block. Now there were some advantages. Actually, I did not buy it for the intended tonal benefits. What I bought it for was I wanted the arm to fit better into the guitar and not have to have the stupid Fender springs that everybody knows or doesn't even realize they even exist. Right?
That you lose most of the time, and most people don't even know what it's in there. So those of you who don't know, or if you've ever owned a Strat, you're going to buy a Strat, there is a very, very, very small spring in there. When we're talking about small, it's smaller than...
Like what you find in a pen.
Yes. It's about that size, what you find inside of a pen. and it's very tight. And so a lot of times you get lost because when the guitar, when the companies get them to put them on the wall, they take the tremolo bars, they're not in there. And so those springs get lost in the shuffle of the stuff that goes around, especially now that a lot of guitars don't come in a case, come in a box.
So their block, I'm not seeing what it's made out of. I believe it's stainless now that I'm looking at it because it's clearly not brass. Here, block details. It is. They talk about the counterbore, the diameter, which of course they make an American version, they make a Mexican version of the Callahan block, and they're countersunk so that they will hold the tremolo bar right. The block material is steel, and not just any steel. The steel used cannot contain any lead, no lead, so it's pure steel, basically. No zinc, no pot metal. It's basically a soft cast steel block.
Right.
And they don't look the same either. They have a like a mirror finish on the surface that actually touches the bridge. And if you go through Callahan's site, like there's a reason why everybody buys the Callahan replacement parts for their vintage guitars, because they have a whole thing where they talk about the bridge plate and the mounting and how Fender has changed it over the years, and they've stuck true to the correct original like vintage 6-screw style bridge, and because of that their tremolo allegedly works better. And I've heard this from players who actually use their stuff. I have not ever had their full bridge assembly, so I can't comment, but I think there's probably some truth to that. I know that Fender's made a lot of running changes over the years, and a lot of people say that the bridges pre-70s worked a lot better, and I think that's because they changed the angle, which is what Callahan's talking about. But anyway, long story short, my experience with changing the bridge block on guitars, going from zinc to the steel, yes, it did what I wanted it to do. It made the tremolo arm sit better. It was not as big a mess. It was easy to install. I would say I got like a 3% increase in sustain. It was minimal, next to nothing. Now, granted, it's not a quote-unquote brass block.
Right.
So the guitars I have played that have either a brass block or some sort of brass saddles, they do resonate differently. I wouldn't say that it necessarily increases the sustain, but it does something to the sound. And another interesting feature, the Yngwie Strat I played a while back, they have a brass nut, and it's almost like a 0 fret. Like it feels like a nut in the way that you play it. Because if you play a 0 fret guitar, your first fret is always, it feels kind of loose,
right?
Because you don't have a nut holding that string in place. This feels like a guitar with a nut, but it sounds like a guitar with a 0 fret, which is really quite interesting. And I think that brightness is not as bright as people would expect it to be, being a metal nut. And that's what I'm getting at, is that it does like a warm roundness to the upper frequencies of the guitar. And I would definitely say that it does increase sustain again, but how much, that's debatable. I mean, it really depends on how much you had before. So my SRV Strat was never lacking sustain. That was never an issue. So for me to do a bridge block upgrade, I didn't feel like I got anything out of it, other than to get my trem bar to work properly. And I was pretty curious, and I want to say this the right way. I didn't A/B test it. So my impressions may have just been on the fact that, like, I spent $80 on a bridge block, and I'm sitting there going, this is stupid. Like,
Yep.
But,
well, you got what you wanted, really. The thing you were after wasn't really a sustain. You were after the
countersink.
Countersink.
Yeah. And
so you spent $80 to make sure that your
I don't even know if it was 80. I think it was a lot cheaper than, I think it was like 40 or something. I don't remember what I paid for. Gone now.
So my brass nut or brass bridge thing comes from bass, playing bass. Everybody said, get this bass bridge, get that bass bridge. I must have changed my bass bridges out 100 times. And honestly, the only thing that ever really gave me anything from it was what they called a badass.
Yeah, the high mass bridge.
Yeah, a high mass badass bridge. And in all honesty, could I have lived without it? Certainly. I didn't. I needed that much. But when you're playing songs like Every Time You Go Away, and stuff like that, where you're playing the long notes on a fretless bass, it did kind of help in that. I don't know if anybody knows that song, but
as not being a bass player, can I comment on this for a second? Because I find it hilarious, the trend in bass guitar, and I know we have some bass players in the group, and you can hate on me if you want, but the trend of bass guitarists, like, we need as much sustain, and I don't think the drive for clarity is as big because you feel bass more than you hear it.
Right.
They want it to sustain like hell. Basically, they don't want the note to decay at all. They want to play a synthesizer, and they're going to lengths of, like, we're going to use active electronics. We're going to use so much compression that, we have to put 2 compressors in line. Because I've seen guys with compressors on their board and compressors built into the amp and running them both. And they have, they have the amp turned up, so they're getting every bit of sustain they possibly can. I knew a guy that used to stand in front of the amp in the right way so the bass would kind of feed back a little bit. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it was like obsession. Yeah. And I get it.
Well,
but is it necessary?
Okay, so again, I played bass for a while. I played bass for a long time. I still play bass. Matter of fact, I was playing bass the other night because I play bass on a couple of songs. The bass player and I switch out, like Folsom Prison Blues and things like that.
Sure.
And I play on Folsom Prison Blues, and I play on a Doobie Brothers song. So one of the things that I want out of a bass, okay, there are times when you have to have. It's harder live than it is studio to get a note to sustain the right way when you need to hit it and then hear it thump and hum under the rest of the band,
right?
While you've got the kick and you've got everybody else going on. When your part is very, very, very few notes. Mm. We're not talking about level 42 now. We're talking about where you're
right.
Thing is, let me get to this. So for me and a lot of bass players I spoke with, because I speak with a lot of them, is that the active electronics isn't about your sustain. The active electronics is about control of your tone.
Okay.
So it is not about. Nobody I know says, yeah, get active electronics for sustain. It's not like when you're getting EMGs for a guitar. It's actually so that you can have control.
Active tone controls, right? But
absolutely,
that also gives you a higher signal level.
Control.
It gives you a higher signal level, which can then be used to boost your
almost all of us
compression.
But almost all of us. You'll notice this on just about every bass amp. You push in the button that says 10 dB pad.
Really?
So you're padding the signal.
Oh, okay.
So I know I padded my signal every time. And the reason was because, yes, there are times when I want to compress my signal. There were songs, again, like I mentioned, Every Time You Go Away. If you sit down and listen to it by a guy named Paul Davis in the bass, I can't remember who the guy's name was that played bass then. It's terrible of me. He played for a lot of famous people, and he also played for The Who for a while.
Okay.
He played. His name just came and went. It's got a weird Italian name, so that's why it's hard for me to pick up in my brain right now. But anyway, he when you're playing fretless has a tendency to die like that.
Yeah, fretless is a whole other animal.
Dead. And for most people who play bass, it's not just the compression. Good bass players, well-seasoned bass players, I shouldn't say good. Well, bass players typically will find that sweet spot that they know how to play, so that you can get the those long, low, slow notes to sustain without a lot of compression. You use a little. I mean, I didn't. I never used any compression, but there are those who will. But the reason is because you want the notes to be, you want your level to be like this. You want it to be pretty flat most of the time. you really don't have a lot of dynamic and volume most of the time with bass in a lot of music. So whether you're playing jazz or you're playing fusion or you're playing disco or you're playing funk or you're playing rock, most of those things, blues. I mean, if you're now picture three-piece band, any good three-piece band. What happens when the guitar player goes to play a solo and the bass player isn't good enough to know how to then change his playing style or her playing style? Right. All it becomes, it's just dead. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm getting at. I know I'm kind of going weird here, but for me, playing bass is and was always about sitting in the pocket and getting the groove and the melody and building that harmonic bridge between the two.
Yeah, and filling out the sound.
Exactly. If you talk to a bass player and you tell him it's an E minor, he goes, "I don't care, I'm just playing E." Then you don't want that bass player.
Yeah. You don't want the 4 on the floor guy. Yeah.
Exactly. You want to. I mean, not everybody can be U2 and know 4 notes and be the rest of your life make millions of dollars as a bass player. Sorry,
I'm nodding my approval.
U2 fans, but he's just not that good. But anyway, I mean, that's why for a bass player, for me at least, getting a bridge that was not subtractive to my tone. That was the important thing. Remember, folks, that the reason you're getting this new hardware is not because you want to be additive to your tone. Believe it or not,
it's to retain what's already there.
Right. Your guitar is doing it, but how fast it goes away is what happens. And who is it? Paul Reed Smith will be the first one to tell you a guitar is a subtractive instrument. Everything it's made of takes the tone away. So you're putting things back or in it to maintain the tone or retain the tone. Can I jump in? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna get my soapbox for just a second. There are a ton of fucking people out there who hear Paul Reed Smith talk about subtractive guitar, and they go, "That's bullshit." Listen to me right now. I don't care if you put fucking EMGs in your pizza box. That's not going to make your pizza box sound like a good guitar. Okay?
No.
Your guitar, everything you do is a filter. Literally everything. It's like in synthesizers. You have to put out a broad set of frequencies and then you use filters to get the things that you want out of that signal. And if you can't understand that, then you're going to have a hell of a time figuring out how to make a guitar sound the way you want it to. That's that. Don't like it? Kiss my ass. Send me an email. questions@practicalguitarist.com.
It comes from that whole, that whole thing. Why do we buy guitars made of certain woods? Why do we go through this whole thing? Tone woods matter, blah, 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 blah. You know what? If it doesn't matter, then the string vibrating across 2 points, that's really what it comes to. You got a string vibrating across 2 points and magnetic pole pieces that are picking up the movement of the string. That's really all it is. You're absolutely right. If that's what you want to say, you are right in that. No one is going to argue that it's not. It's, does the wood subtract from the tone? Does the bridge subtract from the tone? Does the nut subtract from the tone? And yes, there are mechanical things. We have very few moving parts. One, the strings. That's it. That's the only moving part you have. You might sit there and move your tone controls and stuff.
Well, unless your bridge is shitty really, and it fucking vibrates, or
therein lies
that's exactly it,
right? Or your nut is vibrating, or you have a loose fret and it's starting to come, or whatever. Those are the things that are subtracting from your tone. So if you make a guitar out of a pizza box, which I mean we've all seen that thing, right? You better have a really hard pizza box, because after a while that cardboard is subtracting from tone.
Like, I totally get it. Like, okay, so pizza box guitars and stuff. Like, I'm not going to shit on that guy's parade. Look, that's its own niche thing. It's like the cigar box thing. It's not. Yep. Nobody expects that thing to sound like a PRS, Jim. Okay, that's not the intention of it. It's to be kind of kitschy and like silly. But to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to take this $200 square piece of plywood from the mid 90s, that I got for $40 off Craigslist, and I'm going to put these $900 pickups in it. $900 worth of pickups in it, and I'm going to redo all the electronics, and it's going to sound just like that American Standard that has been upgraded. Bullshit. No, it's not. No, it's not, because the reality is there's so much glue in that guitar and other things that are going to affect that. Now, it might only be 10% different. I'm not going to lie and say that it's going to be night and day different, but the reality is it's different, and if you want that extra 10%, you're going to have to spend the money.
Well, I think that there's another thing. Okay, so we all have the what I call it, the honeymoon period. When you bring a axe home and it's like, oh, it's the best thing I've ever played. 10 months later, it's like, oh, this thing's a pile of shit.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Yeah, and then when you look at a guitar that's made for $200, you got to think, like you're talking about, the glue, the wires, the routes, the screws, everything that's in it, and the pop metal stuff. If you're playing night after night and you have to depend on that thing, that's when those things start to matter. It's just like when you buy a car. You can buy a Mercedes or you can buy a Honda. And will the Honda and the Mercedes get you to point A and point B at 65 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour, however you drive? Yes, of course they will. But which one is going to have more mechanical problems?
Yeah, and
that's really what you're doing with a guitar.
So with cheap metal, the worst problem you could have is mechanical problems, right?
Right.
The mid-level problem is it sounds like crap and is not readily adjustable. And your high-level issue is it looks like shit, right? So to get into the higher quality hardware, this is why I love my G&Ls. They have the absolute best 2-point tremolo I've ever seen on a guitar on them. Their bridge, like the Badass bridge, is high mass, it's big. It's built out of extremely high-quality parts. You can spend extra money when you order one and get titanium, I think it's titanium, saddles for it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they're outstanding. That's stainless saddles, which, great, right? They're outstanding. I have nothing but good things to say about the quality of her. Even the bridge block is a high-quality bridge block. Jim, you've seen it. I mean, you could look at it and you go, holy crap. Like, it's high mass and shiny as shit because it's all polished up to look good, and they really do number. And I've had mine out of my guitar. It's heavy as hell. And probably adds a pound or two to the guitar. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But my point is, when you pay more and you get higher quality hardware, it's usually beneficial. I'm looking at the Ibanez AZ, right? The Prestige model. So you know what the difference between the Prestige and the Indonesian one is?
No.
Other than a little bit of work that goes on the neck. The only difference I've found, other than the finishes and the neck stuff, is that the bridge on the Prestige model is a higher quality bridge. I believe it's made, I want to say, aircraft grade titanium. So, I don't know. Now, is that $1,000 difference? I'm not sure.
And here's where I get a little ticked off at the companies that do that. So they know that you go, you know what? These two guitars are the same except for this bridge. I'll just buy this cheaper guitar, buy the bridge, and put it on.
Well, no. So in that case,
slightly different size.
No, I think I think in that case, I don't think it's an aftermarket part. I think that's an Ibanez part, and I don't know if you can buy it direct from them, their bridge, because I know people like the low pro trims and stuff. I know people buy and sell those all the time on the used market because can't buy the replacement part without actually having the guitar or something. That's what I've been told. I know Fender used to do that.
I don't know.
Did you know? Well, I know. Did you know that? So if you broke your old Fender neck and you wanted to get a replacement, you had to send in the broken one, and that was so that people couldn't just buy Fender necks and make guitars.
Well, for the stores, what they do is that's why that one guitar guy, Dumpster Dives.
The guitarologist.
What they do is they require proof. Yeah, they require proof. You have to smash the guitar, take a picture, and then that way you don't have to mail the whole thing back, because they were eating a lot of shipping costs that way on both ends. So they were like, hey, we don't want to pay for the shipping. And the people who were shipping were like, well, we don't want to pay for the shipping. Somebody's got to pay for the shipping. Well, take a picture of it smashed with the serial number.
What were there any more hardware things listed in that list that we need to cover?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit over some stuff. A couple of these were covered. Locking tuners. This is my feeling. If a guitar costs $400 or more, they should have fucking locking tuners on it. Come on. They're not that expensive anymore. There are a lot of inexpensive locking tuners, and there are a lot of expensive locking tuners. But there is absolutely no reason a guitar $450, $500 shouldn't have locking tuners on it. None.
I would agree with you. I don't know that 400 is the cutoff for me, but I also feel like it is such an essential upgrade now. The manufacturers know you're going to throw them on there anyway. It's time for them to stop installing shitty fucking tuners on everything.
Right.
The quality of tuners has gotten better on cheaper guitars, but the thing is, I want the convenience of just sticking a string through there, cutting it off. Like this crap of wind, and have to have a string winder and all that crap. Let's end it. It's time. You want a vintage repro? Fine. You go buy your 57 Strat. We'll continue to put vintage tuners on there that I hate. Because there's a reason they stopped doing that for a while. Because they realized that those tuners suck. They're horrible.
They suck.
They might be critical to the tone, but I'll deal with the difference. Okay, it's fine.
That's the same thing for me when it comes to Les Pauls. Don't give me the Clousons. Give me the new Goto locking tuners.
No, I get it. Some people need an option, and that's what the custom shop's for. So
exactly. The other thing was the Floyd Rose rail tail. We talked about that a little bit, and so you've really got more than I do as far as this thing goes. I just figured it seems like a lot of work. Are you going to get what you want out of it?
I would say so. Compared to just replacing with a standard bridge, and you're saying it's a lot of work. There's like 2 extra steps. I mean, it's almost nothing. What it gives you is tuning stability, number one. I mean, and tremolo stability, which for a lot of people, if you use and abuse a trem, like there's no reason not to do either that system or the Super V. I mean,
the Super V is the other one that would be,
and they're both on my hit list for Strat trems. And then the Babix is also there, and I think the Babix you can get the saddles for the Babix saddles installed on a Super V.
Yeah,
so you can order a Super V custom with the Babix saddles, which is kind of cool. And I thought about doing that, but I don't know. You can get a really expensive Super V if you deck it out.
I think for a Strat, I would do the Floyd Rose rail tail.
I was going to do. There's definitely some reasons for that.
When you first mentioned Floyd Rose, my brain went immediately to the Floyd Rose system, and I was like,
No, this thing is it's just got a little metal bar that mounts over the 6 screw holes, and you do have to do a little bit of alignment work with this bridge, which is why I said there's a couple extra steps, but ultimately I think it's probably the easiest to install aftermarket bridge that gives you really stable tuning.
More easy to install with a 6-point tremolo system than a 2-point. I'm not saying you can't do it.
No, you wouldn't want to upgrade a 2-point anyway. And that's my whole thing. Like the reason why people upgrade Strat bridges, and this I'm just thinking about this from the marketing standpoint. The reason why people upgrade 6 screw bridges is because they're really looking for a 2-point tremolo system, right? They want to be able to use their trem wildly and have the guitar remain reasonably well in tune. And I know people shit all over the Fender 2-point systems, but if they're designed properly, they work reasonably well. And if they're set up properly, they work reasonably well. Going to a 6-screw system, you have no knife edge, okay, which means that it's never going to return to 0 if you're floating, and otherwise you have to deck it, and then you have to hope that your screws are exactly the same height across the bridge. It's a system that's prone to failure. It was a bad design.
Yep.
Okay. The 2-point fixes a lot of those problems. And I've seen guys actually notch 2 of the screws and pivot the whole bridge on those 2 screws and use them like a knife edge. Would I do that? No. I think if you're going to go that far, you might as well just throw the posts and be done with it. there are a lot of 2-post options out there. The Godo bridges are excellent. People love those things.
Yep.
And so I'm not. The parts exist to make a 2-point grate. Parts exist to make a 6 screw bridge that you don't want to permanently modify exist. There's the Super V, there's the Railtail, and I'm sure there are other options out there, even other than the Bavics. So enjoy. I mean, it's you don't have to put the two screw holes in it. If you're going to go that route, I mean, technically, even the Floyd Rose is a replacement bridge. At that point, granted, you're not going to have a recessed Floyd on a Strat, but you could probably float it. You might have to install a 1/2-inch shim in your neck to get your neck up high enough to accommodate a floating Floyd. But I don't know. So to each their own. Like that, the whole Strat Trem thing, it's been done to death. I think there are some really good designs still being made out there. G&L's one of them. And Callaham's vintage correct bridge is probably pretty good. And of course, we've looked at these other options as well, and they're all viable. So if you really want to invest, you can find a system that works for you.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. There's a lot of companies out there, and if you're looking for one with an acoustic in it, I recommend the Fishman, Fishman replacement bridge.
Yeah,
it's a whole system, and it comes with the Fishman acoustic pickups in it. So the other thing that was asked that totally nice trolling, John. We give you a thumbs up for this. The Gibson robot tuners. One look at the Gibson 2019 lineup, the fact that the robot tuners are gone finally from the complete lineup, even the high performance.
Well, there's allegedly
I have no idea why you would put those on the thing.
Allegedly a massive lawsuit because Gibson was selling them and was not giving the company that designed them, Tronicle, their due assets. But I think I think there's a bit of a dispute there because Tronicle took the idea that Gibson had developed back in the 80s. Because they had actually developed a guitar called the Robot that I don't know if it ever came to production, but they developed this self-tuning guitar.
You're talking about the Gibson Robot,
the early one, the prototype they built in the 80s.
Not the one. Yeah,
I don't think it might
not have. I know the one was it the 90s or the early 2000s?
No, it was the early 2000s when the Robot came out.
Didn't have the battery.
It was like 2005, 2006. Well, that was the you're thinking of the Firebrand.
Yeah,
that thing is a piece of shit. But there was before that, I think there was like a Les Paul Robot or something. But so the original Robot was an 80s prototype they built that had a self-tuning system, and I don't think it ever came to market. And I think maybe that's what they're going to argue in court with. I believe it's Tronicle that they're in litigation with over missed payments or whatever for their systems. And then it's funny, and then of course the 2019 lineup does not feature the robot tuners anywhere. No. The stupid thing is, I don't think robot tuners should disappear from the face of the earth. I think at some point that technology will mature and everybody will be using them.
Yep.
But we're just not there yet.
No. And honestly, all right, so having used it, I didn't have the problems that other people had. But after a while, and I think it really has to do with the battery, and I think I think that's part of the problem. Batteries are a pain in the ass. And if battery loses a little bit of power, it's not gonna give the crystal. So how a tuner works is there's a crystal in there, and a crystal it takes power from the battery, and then that's what causes vibrations and picks up the vibrations and so on and so forth. Anyway, the accuracy of that can change with the battery. So it doesn't make any sense yet. So I found that if my battery was a little bit, off, and of course they were rechargeable, recharge the battery. But
I'm gonna catch shit for this, but I'm gonna bring this up too. So I think the other problem that people had with those tuning systems is the same thing that you have when you use a clip-on tuner. I'm sure we have listeners that have clip-on tuners. Everybody has them now, and you can get them for
I do,
basically free.
Yep.
Clip-on tuners are convenient, but they aren't super accurate. Okay? Anybody who tells you their clip-on tuner is going to beat a strobe tuner or a rack tuner or even a decent tuner pedal, like a TU3 or something like that, chances are they're wrong. I've actually run my now. I have I have a couple of them actually. I have the Polytune one, which is nice. But I'll tell you
got the
what,
Polytune one and the Snark.
I don't feel like any of the tuners I own right now is all that great. As far as tuning up an instrument and then hitting open chords and stuff. Now, all my guitars, like my main axes, are all floating, so that's part of the issue. There is I have to tune them like 5-6 times, and even then they're not completely in tune; they're out. There's nothing you can do about it. That's part of the floating system, especially when you play it. Depending on where you rest your hands and all that, you change tension, and so forth. But I had the Polytune, the actual floor Polytune, and I felt like that's the best tuner I've ever owned. When I used that thing, my guitar was in tune, as close as it's ever going to get. And I kind of kicked myself because I sold mine. And that will be an investment at end of Year of No Gear. I'll probably get a good quality floor tuner. I wouldn't mind having one of the Strobo Soft ones. But
I used the Boss TU.
Like $300.
Yeah, I used the Boss TU3 in strobe mode. So, I mean, you do what you can. But I've only got to be as accurate as the bass player. So
right. So as I look through the list here, I see one that I want to address, which is Fret Wraps, Jimmy Clips, Foam Under the Strings, Not Behind the Bridge.
Okay, so yeah, this is one of the few things where you're actually talking about something that you want to be subtractive to the tone of guitar.
So I'm probably going to invest in some stuff just so we can do some testing. The Fret Wraps, Jimmy Clips, the Foam Under the Strings. I've done the Foam Under the Strings, Above the Nut, Behind the Bridge. For playing in the studio, like let's say you're tracking something, those things, the Foam Under the Strings and Behind the Bridge, and even in the tremolo cavity and in strats and stuff, do make an impact. Okay? I don't know that it would matter in a live setting because it's so loud and stuff, and it's just, some of those things don't come across live as well as they do in a delicate studio setting. So if you're tracking your gent tune in the studio and you want to make sure that you're getting proper palm muting and that notes die quickly and that there's no harsh overtones or anything going on when strings are resonating and whatnot, those are definitely things you can do. The foam and the Jimmy Clip and all that. The other thing that wasn't mentioned here, the thing that Jennifer Batten uses, and I forget what it's called. Yeah, basically, it's what it is. She uses it's like a hairband, sweatband kind of thing that she just slides down over the strings when she does her 2-finger tapping to deaden all the notes that would ring out if it wasn't there. If you've ever heard somebody, actually, I think you can probably find demonstrations of her doing this on YouTube where she shows it with and without. It is night and day for two-handed tapping. If you're one of those people, get some scrunchies or something, because I'll tell you what, it'll clean your playing up significantly. So
honestly, the scrunchy thing was what guitar players were using for years.
Or a sock,
somebody decided,
or a sock. Yeah,
a sock. Yeah. Who was it? Victor Wooten, bass player. Get back to bass. Another one that used that.
Batten used a sock too, by the way. She used to use a sock before she got her things made in China that you can buy through her website.
Was it a happy sock?
I have no idea. Probably Jennifer Batten. It was Jennifer Batten's sock. It was probably "This foot does not stink" kind of thing. I don't know. Because
it never had to get used on feet.
Yeah.
It was happy. And all it did was sit in a guitar case, went back in the case.
Yeah, that actually would make a sock happy.
I think
never be trampled upon.
That's right. To never be stepped on.
Mm-hmm. I think we covered everything. I think we hit them all.
I think we did. Yeah. So the only thing that we didn't talk about that you do sometimes is putting the foam behind the springs. Did you mention that?
Okay.
Putting the foam behind the springs.
So on a guitar, especially one where you either have 4 springs or more, and you have the tremolo decked, you can hear and I would say that's probably the perfect storm of conditions. You can hear almost a spring reverb sound coming out of when you play the instrument. All right.
Yep.
Single notes, chords, you'll hear it with everything. Although I think, if I recall, the last guitar I had that did it really bad, it's actually my White Strat. When you play chords on it, it was noticeably worse. So I didn't actually use foam at first. I used Kleenex, of all things, because anything that touches those springs will keep them from vibrating. Now, there's a very particular way in which you have to install this, because if you just stuff it in there, right, and you do a dive bomb or something, and the strings or the springs that are inside stretch, and then they come back to tension, guess what's going to happen? It's going to grab that, and it's going to pinch, and then of course you're going to have problems with tuning. So I like the Kleenex because I could wrap it in tape and then put it in there almost like a block on top of the springs. And since it was flat because of the tape, the springs didn't vibrate. So
and they didn't catch it.
Yep, that's my pro tip. So I would make like a little, it almost looked like a little napkin packet thingy that would go in there to touch the. Yeah, it was so crafty. Let me tell you. And then of course I would use the back plate to hold it in place. But I've seen people actually just tape it in there. It's fine, and it probably would work great.
And for people on a budget, you can use the napkins first, and then put them in tape.
I have my mouth in full, wide open, what the fuck, Jim mode right now. For those, those of you who are actually still listening to this bullshit. Yeah, I'm sorry if you're still listening. So we're wrapping this episode up. I want to reach out to our listeners, encourage anybody who is not a member of the Facebook group to join. We got an active community there. A lot of the suggestions for this podcast episode were pulled from the Facebook group. And also want to apologize. We've been having some connection issues during this episode. Jim's audio is not going to be great in post, but it'll be legible. You'll be able to hear it. So apologize, but you can deal with it.
I am so sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to speak, so I don't know. I don't know how it sounded on your end. So
it's that West Virginia internet or whatever. You're not in West Virginia anyway. You're in Virginia.
I'm not in West Virginia. I'm from Virginia.
Yeah,
here in Virginia.
Nothing is good about that either way.
Well, I'm in Southern Virginia.
You're either close to Washington or.
The thing is, so we're like 3.5 hours from Washington, and everything. Yeah. Everybody's like
shit
a Washington
Redskins fan. Shit rolls downhill, right?
Yeah. You can't stand to be around Redskins fans when they're winning. So, anyway.
Also, sound off about the new bumper in the podcast group if you made it this far. So. Yeah,
and if you don't know what a bumper is, that's where Dave begs for money. And,
I beg you for money and resources, and then there's like a really cool tune that I did underneath it, and so I'm begging for your commentary
for approval.
Yes.
His daddy doesn't give him enough love, and he needs the approval from you.
You leave my father.
Actually, my father. You can talk about my father because he's been dead for like 20-something years.
Yeah, mine's still alive. Got a hole in his gut right now, but he's still alive. He just had hernia surgery. Dad, if you're listening, hope you feel better.
Yeah,
I know you're not. So fuck you.
Yeah, fight me. I might meet this guy. I don't want to say that. No. All right, so anyway.
Yeah, you don't want him to fight you.
No. He can beat me up, I'm sure of that.
Why don't you take us out this time, Jim?
I'll take us out. I've been Jim.
And I've been David.
And we have been...
The Practical.
That's right.
There's a creepy eyebrow raiser.